You're listening to the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, your host, Ben Eagle. For previous episodes, visit thinkingcountry.com or find the podcast on iTunes or SoundCloud by searching for Meet the Farmers. Hello everyone and welcome to the show. This is a special episode of Meet the Farmers. Meet the Farmers specials are slightly different to normal episodes in that we focus on a farming issue in depth. Today we're talking about a subject that became rather close to home for me a couple of years ago. Not that many of you will know that, as I haven't discussed it much on here openly. We're talking about mental health, specifically mental health in the workplace. So a couple of years ago, I was juggling a lot of different eggs in one basket, as I probably am still now, but I've become a lot better than I was, and I became completely overwhelmed, to cut a very long story short, and went through a bit of a difficult time, but I've come out the other end of it all the stronger for it. But it does mean that I look on this subject with eyes of experience, and it's really, really important. I cannot keep saying that enough, how important it is that we keep discussing this subject. So for this conversation, I was really pleased to be joined by Dan Goodwin, who was the Suffolk Agricultural Apprentice winner in 2018, has since left the industry, but is a campaigner for improving awareness of mental health in farming. And Steve Loeber, who is a signalman at Network Rail and a trainee engineer at the Steam Tug Portway Trust. So we're talking about mental health in farming. We're also talking about the railways and looking at two different industries and see actually quite how similar they are. It was actually Steve who approached me about making this episode after we both went along to a mental health in the workplace conference in Colchester back in September, and we realised there is a lot of crossover in terms of mental health challenges between working on farms and working on the railways. We recorded this episode just before Christmas. I hope you all had a brilliant Christmas and have had a good start to the new year. Big thanks as always to the Mercer Family Charitable Foundation for supporting this episode. If you enjoy the episode, if you get something out of it, I hope you will. Please do share it on your networks. And if you want to subscribe to the podcast, it's available on quite a lot of different platforms, from Apple Podcasts through to SoundCloud and lots of other podcast providers as well. So give it a subscribe, and it'd be amazing also if you could just give it a comment. It honestly makes a huge difference. So let's head over to Dan and Steve.
So I'm Dan Goodwin, I'm 22, from Bury St Edmunds. Been in farming for at least 10 years. Had a variety of jobs, come from the voluntary side, worked myself up, and then I joined my local agriculture college. From then I pursued on my dreams, which were to get as many qualifications as I can to get me a stable enough future to go into the industry. So for a number of years I was on the same place, farm, brought my knowledge up, then moved on to my next job up, which is in the Fenlands, which grew a lot of turf, a lot of special crops that we've never heard of and no one talks about, but we still use day-to-day life. And then I went on to another farm which is on North Norfolk, but unfortunately I discovered that I had a problem with mental health, and I decided to come out of it and tell everyone, which means social media as well. And since that day I am completely out of the farming industry. Given help, I've got help, and I'm also advising people from the ages of 17 to around 50 plus on advice on mental health within farming, and trying to campaign on how the mental health should be a bigger issue and should be looked at more within the farming industry. And now I've found out it needs to be looked at in a number of other industries within the whole country.
Brilliant. Steve?
Right, well, mine's slightly different to Dan's. I sort of came into the railway industry in 1983, but I was born into a railway family. So like farming, once you were born into a railway family, in most cases you ended up working in the industry concerned. Okay. When I started at that time, it was British Railways, before it was all privatised. And in those days, it was father to son, because they knew the fact was that you were basically going into that industry. They knew it was shift work. Like the farming industry, we do work shifts, so we work early turns, late turns, nights. So that's basically what happened. But I started at a place called King's Cross. I was a messenger for about 2 years, what they used to call a junior railman. I did that from 83 to 85, and then I went into what they call the Central Dispatch Office. That was a much more extended operation. As I'll explain, before we had computers and emails and things like that, everything on the railway used to come in by post. We had our own internal postal system that used to be for railway post only. So this was all going on within the British rail industry. I did that for about 6 to 8 months, and then I became a signalman in 1985 when I worked at my first box at Shippey Hill, not far from Lake and Heath in the Fenlands. That was my very first box, very old-fashioned mechanical signal box with below, I don't know if you know what I mean by levers and semaphore signals and all this, all very old-fashioned. Then I sort of went on to other jobs in the signalling industry, worked my way up, so I went to work sort of in the London division. After that I went to work on the London Tilbury South End, Wood Grange Park box I walked in North London. Then I went from there, I went to Forest Gate box, that was still part of the old boxes that were still existing on the main line until they were swept away in 1991. But then I did Forest Gate, Ilford, Car Sheds, Ilford Station, Gidea Park, Stratford big panel, there was 3 panels up there, so it was quite a big operation. And then in 89 they started to re-signal, Liverpool Street, new box came in, and they still did bits and pieces, and then I realised there was going to be big changes and redundancies going to come with the closure of these old-fashioned boxes. So then I went to work at another power box called King's Cross. That's on the East Coast main line, did that for a couple of years. Then worked then I went to Wimbledon for a few years as a signalman, worked the big Wimbledon power box there. And then I went back to King's Cross, and then I went into what they call training. I did signalling training for about 5 years. So I was actually teaching the signalman how to actually work the boxes. You know, I was teaching the rules and regulations, and so I did that, and then went back into signalling in 2003 at Liverpool Street, and did that for about 12 years. Then I ended up having, because of health issues, not what we're talking about, but health, I had to end up to Colchester. So I've been at Colchester now 4 years. So hopefully that's my small potted history.
So even though it's still within a relatively small area, there's a lot of moving about there.
Yes.
Were you living in the same place?
Yes, I was. I was actually living in Chelmsford at the time. So I was commuting to Wimbledon. It used to take me about 2 hours. So but then I thought, no, this is absolutely silly. I wanted to, because what it was, King's Cross was 1 grade, and Wimbledon was another. You see, so King's Cross was a grade 7, Wimbledon was a grade 8. So then I wanted to progress, and that was the only way I could do it. But in respect, I was thinking about moving, but didn't. So in the end, they actually upgraded King's Cross to the same grade. I thought, well, what am I doing? So then I went back to King's Cross. So you used to do it for grades and promotion, basically.
Can you both explain the pressures faced within your particular industries and why they might impact on mental health? So let's turn to the railways first of all.
Yes, well, especially
what are those pressures that
the pressures
are facing?
Well, it can be work related, because you're working in a very pressured environment, because you're taking responsibility for people's lives in respect, especially being what I do as a signal or signaller, what they call them. And you have to realise that decisions have to be made split second, and the decisions you make could impact on a very serious incident, because everything's running okay if the system's running okay, but it's when the system breaks down that the signalman comes into his own, or the person comes into their own, because you have to make sure that's done correctly, because you haven't got the protection of the system, if you get what I mean. So that means you have to make that decision, so you're under a lot of pressure all the time, and because then again you've got pressures of, again, you have to regulate trains now, so you have to try and do that properly to keep everything on set times, and if you make an error you can get they say you shouldn't have done that. So you are under the set pressures all the time within the rail industry. You have to make sure things are done, safety has to be monitored and so forth, so you have got these different issues that you can confront.
Dan, you're an ambassador for Yellow Wellies, so you know quite broadly the pressures across. Again, we were talking before we started recording about how disparate and broad agriculture is. There's people working in all sorts of areas and all sorts of different pressures. What are the kind of pressures that people working in farming broadly are facing?
Yeah, some of the stuff that Steve said is exactly what we have in farming completely. Some of the decisions you have to make have to be split second. We have we don't have we have a lot of people lives in risk for us, but mainly it's our life itself. So if I have something go wrong on a bit of machinery, I have to make a very split decision.
Yeah.
What am I going to do?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, most of the machinery farming is bigger than you. There's only going to be one win, and that will be the win of the machinery. There's most things on the farm can kill you, so you have to be very careful. The health and safety, you have to think same as a rail line.
Yeah.
So there's so much similar things that are together, and there was a lot of pressure on a lot of farmers. I had a lot of pressure. There's so many jobs in the roles that I've been doing that had horrendously pressure. With one of them was spraying, and the spraying is such an important key thing in the farming. It's being crucified by more legislation and due to the public as well. So anything you're going to do wrong could easily come back onto the farm or yourself. You've got that pressure on you. One little mistake can be like a volcano and it would be exploding. So you're constantly having that all the time, every day. I feel
that's it.
Yeah.
So you can see the comparisons between farmers and railwaymen.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Because we have to look at the health and safety aspect as well. A decision you make could impact seriously on somebody's life. If you get what I mean. Because we have a situation where you could be cleared for a train's given the signal, but we could get an emergency code just like that. We call it 6 bells or emergency alarm, where you have to literally throw all those signals back to danger to protect an obstruction or an incident, and that has to be split second done.
Yeah.
You've got to stop that train, and that's what the sort of issues that we have to deal with as that particular grade do.
Yeah, and in some ways, sort of playing devil's advocate a bit, it's part of the job. It's before we sign on for these things, we know that's part of the job.
It is.
But at the same time, if you don't actually acknowledge it, and it's just always that underlying stress.
Yes.
How do you deal with that underlying stress?
It's that one's difficult. I think what you try and do, you just try and focus on what you're trying to do. I think the job, you try and just focus on the job you're doing.
Yeah.
I think, but there's always that little niggling thing at the back of your mind, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
Stress can be managed in different ways. I think people have different ways of managing stress. I think that's the way it is. Some people don't even show it, but I think something we do suffer, and you think, sometimes if you have a break or something, we have a break off the workstation or panels, you sort of think, I could have done that a bit better, or something that's a bit better. But sometimes things can get excessively stressful. You do have that issue with anything you do like this.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with that. I mean, I remember some of the stuff that I've have to do. If something goes wrong, you think, I could have done that better. If something's not right and it's in your back of your mind, you think on it.
Yeah.
With me, when I was working on the farm, I hardly ever switched off. I was always, when I got home, I was still thinking, right, what did I do today? What have I got to do tomorrow? I've got this coming in tomorrow. I've got this to do tomorrow. And it just never stopped. And I can fully agree with what you said, Steve, is that it's always going to be in the back of your mind. And I think when people were shocked about me is when they asked me, are you alright? And I go, yep, I'm fine. And I said that for at least 10 years. And I'm sure that's the same in the rail line. People ask you how you're getting on. Yeah, I'm all good.
That's
you
it.
know in yourself you're not. You've got a lot of things on your mind. You're thinking of things that could go wrong or
That's
could
exactly
happen.
it. Exactly, Dan. And that's the same thing with us, because I've had issues where I've done something during the day, I've had a really bad shift, or something's happened, and I could have done that better. I could have done this better. You reflect on yourself, and then by doing so, this is impacting on your mental health as well. You don't realise it at the time. It's something that's just creeping up on you, And I had very bad days sometimes where you've had the day's gone all right, but I thought you get back home and think, I should have done that better, or I could have done this better, or I could have done that slightly differently. But at the time, you're having to deal with the situation as you go, and decisions are made. If it's the right or wrong decision, you've had to go with it. But you think to yourself, I could have done so better in that.
Yeah.
You see, that's how it works.
I think, Dan, you raised two really good points there. One is the point of switching off, and I think that goes for Steve, I'm interested in your view from an employed context, from a self-employed context. I see that in lots of people who run businesses, is that there's always that you could always do more, and when you're not doing whatever your business is, or you're not on the farm, or you're always thinking about that. So shutting off is one point, and then the other point I think that was really good that you made is both the expression "I'm fine," but also noticing in other people when they might be struggling, but
Yep.
they're not going to admit it. Generally, it's the people who seem the strongest that there's perhaps some sort of struggle going on, because it's we become very good at kidding ourselves and putting on that front. Steve, from a railways perspective, are you always at work?
Yes. Some days you finish the shift and you sign off and you do switch off. You know, some of the lads do say at the end of the shift with our job, you know, we do switch off. But if you've had, say, like a rough day or something's happened, or something you've had issues that have gone on through the day, you do sometimes not always do it. You walk out the door and the door slams, but then sometimes your mind is still working on that issue. So that's when it does happen to us, I think. Most of the time it's just been a normal day, normal signalling practices have gone ahead and everything's gone right. You just usually walk the door, that's good, and you go home and switch off. It's when things go wrong that it does play on the mind. I think that's the big thing. You know, so you have something had gone wrong and you've had a bad day. That's when I think sometimes the mind doesn't always switch off. It's just playing on your mind all the time. So you're sitting at home, but it's still sort of like resonating there.
Apart from maybe politicians and bankers, I don't think I can think of two different areas that the public complain about more than
Yes.
farmers and the railways.
Yes.
They seem to be like two subjects that it's just free reign for the public to just get at.
Yes.
Do you find that?
Oh yeah,
Definitely.
we do.
It's always being scrutinised and I would say being picked on, especially in this day and age at the moment, that I think people that are not in the industry, and I'm sure in the rail lines, but they don't know how it's like and what we have to do as farmers and what the rail people have to go on the network. But there is so much more than people think there is. It's not just like a split second decision or anything can happen. There's decisions and things can go wrong. It's just how it is. And I'm shocked today to find out how close rail lines and farming is. I've never put them two together, and now I can.
You can, you see, this is the difference. But it's the same in the railways. You see, one day it could work one day, next minute we could have the wires come down. People don't understand it. You could have a very strong wind, that brings the wires down, and because you've got to get the men out to put the wires back up, so that impacts on the train service. This is what happens, you see. The weather can do so much damage, you know, onto the infrastructure. It's so quick. You know, 1 minute it's working normally, next minute the whole lot's completely put into chaos. That's what happens.
Yeah, definitely same in farming, but 100%. If we have a wet harvest of any crop, especially potatoes, if potatoes are failed in crop, it's going to impact on everyone's life. If the prices are going to go up, and then they get moaned about why the price we can't. It's just how the weather is. It's same with the sugar beet in this. As we speak now, the sugar is very, very hard to get out of the ground, the sugar beet, because it's the weather conditions, how wet it is, and that could easily make the price of the sugar go up because there ain't enough. So it depends so much on weather, and I think people don't understand. It's not our fault that things change on price. It's Mother Nature that no one can control.
Let's talk about support networks. Dan, tell us about Yellow Wellies and what that's all about.
So since I've been getting help from my local GP, Yellow Wellies, which is a national charity, got in touch with me. And I've met themselves before because they come to my local grade college. They highlight the safety on farming, and they also highlight the mental health within the farming. And they go around across the country all year round doing health and safety chats with younger generation and showing them what the issues are there on the accident side and what they can prevent it and what they need to do. Also they do the mental health side, which is with a hashtag of Mind Your Head, which I'm now slowly working with them for the next campaign in October. So we're thinking about how we can get this more national and get this more recognised, because it's something that is not really recognised, and I've never heard of their mental health campaign. So that's what the Yellow Wellies, and that's what they're doing well with, to talk to younger people that are coming into the industry, that they know that there is a support network with them that they can go to and get help.
Are there any similar networks or conversations being had within rail?
There is indeed. So Network Rail now are setting up a structure, what we call mental health champions, and they are now one. I've learnt the course, and basically it's actually putting people out there. So if people have got an issue, they can turn to this person. We're called mental aid first aiders, I suppose, in a small way, but they can come to us, get assistance, and we can pass them on to a company called Validium, who can help them out in respect of different things done in respect of counselling and debt management. Also, there is other structures out there as well. In regards to, we've got the railway chaplains or the railway mission that's been going for quite so many years. This has gone for quite a long years, because the railway the way it was. The actual railway mission was set up to try and help these people within the railway industry. You know, people look at it as a religious thing, but it's not. They also help out with mental health and things like that. So you can turn to a chaplain and get assistance. I have, from my personal experience, have been a great help to me. They're an exceptional great help. And they sort of go out and they'll try and help, and you can contact them and they'll arrange to talk to you and things like that. Again, being as a fact, I'm a health and safety rep. The other side of it is the RMT union. They're getting very strong with mental health as well. And myself as a health and safety rep, we also have to do safety inspections and so forth as Dan, so we have to check things. But also the actual welfare side is becoming much more involved as well. And that's why I became a, shall we say, wellbeing champion as part of my role in that. But we've had health and safety conferences with the RMT, and one of them was about mental health, and it's been highlighted that more needs to be done between the companies and the unions in regards to this. And our unions are very strong with it at the moment.
Why do you think there's been such a change, which I think I've recognised in the last couple of years, to do with people just talking more about this subject? Why now?
I think it's because personally, this is a personal view, I think it's because of the royal family. Because I think William and Harry came out with this. Yeah. And they said, with mental health, and it was something that's been taken forward. So I think that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good thing, And by highlighting it, it's made people more aware of it. And of course, I think this is why we've had campaigns and awareness made. Until those two actually made that statement, I think mental health was looked at as a bit of a taboo. That's how I feel about it.
I fully agree there. It's very true. Now, I never really thought to put them two together, and it's now within, I have to say, and it's been brought up to my college that when I was at college we never talked about mental health. It never got mentioned at all. And it's something that I said to them, I go, well, why wasn't it? You made such a big thing about the health and safety, but you missed the mental health. And there was no recognising of what people we should go to. And I definitely think recently now, since I've made my thing quite big, there's been a lot going on the news about mental health. I know within the last couple of weeks the NHS have gone massive on them as well with some of their stuff, and it's something that it's now being brought up a lot, and it still needs to be talked about. But definitely think from the royal family, something spurred a lot of people on.
It did, absolutely. And I think this is because before that it was always a taboo subject. People never talked about it. People used to say, I'm fine, but they weren't fine. No. Now, because we've now said this is why it's been highlighted, people are now saying more, I'm not fine, I've got a problem. And this is why I think it's a good thing that we've had these, like Dad said, these campaigns.
It's fine to not be fine.
It is, yes. I think we've all done it. We've all sat there and said we're fine. As Dan said earlier, well, sometimes when I had my little issue, I wasn't fine. No. So then I had to go to the support networks to get help, same way as Dan, it just crept up on you.
Yeah.
I had a very rough night one night. Didn't realise it until I realised that something had gone wrong. Then I realised it was just too late. It's just like how can I put this? It sort of creeps up on you behind. You don't know it's going to come, and when it does come, it comes as like a massive, great rush. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally like a lion stalking its prey. It slowly comes up to you, and then bang, it goes for you. And I remember when I said to some people to me, I'm just having a bit of a low day. It goes, another day tomorrow, to get on with it.
This is it.
Get on with it. And it's hard to say, and I've had to say it, but it seems it's the older generation that goes, just another day, get on with it. And the young, I know myself and a couple of people I've spoken to, the younger people, it's like, well, it's not another day, it's something I need support, and they go, just get on with it. It's just another day.
That is true, that is the problem. I suppose it comes back from the factors of the conflict of war. People got on with it. You know, you've got to look at the war side of it during the war, and they said just get on with it, and they're fed get on with it. And I think again the other side of it is I think the other impacts of social media and other things have impacted on this as well that they don't seem to understand sometimes. You know, so I think that's the other side of it. You know, that happens. And you know, I've had it say, well, you'll be all right tomorrow, get on with it. No, you're not. And I think that needs to be highlighted. Yes, it's very true what Dan says.
The thing that I found is anything that goes put on social media can either go two ways. It can go massively looked at or just being shoved under the carpet and removed.
So true.
And I know when I put my thing on social media, I was just hovering on my thumb was over the post button, do I post this or not? What's the reaction? And I posted it and it just went, the reaction was not what I expected.
But I think, as you say, Dan, social media is a good thing, but sometimes it could also be a bad thing.
Yep,
you know, because some people have done that and they've come unstuck with it.
Yep.
You know, I'm trying to say, I've heard people say that. And, you know, sometimes certain things should be put on social media, but sometimes certain things should not. You know, that's my personal view.
Yeah.
But that, you know, and I think sometimes you have to be careful what you do because, you know, in case you don't want to let everybody know what you feel and how you think and what you do and how you go on. It is a good thing. Some things, as Dan said, get taken up, some things get pushed under the carpet. But I think in a respectful way, I think we should have a much better network in regards to mental health and people out there to help us. Yep. And it needs to be sorted out, if it's the NHS or certain charities or the companies. They need to look at this more in depth, you know, because we are, you know, it could be a change in culture, but I think it needs to be addressed. Well, anyway, any age, any person needs to look at their mental health. Definitely.
I mean, I feel like it shouldn't have to go on social media for people to realise the person that's in question should go to someone or a charity, or the charity can get highlighters and they come to them. They shouldn't really have. I feel like they shouldn't have to keep putting it on social media to go and get help.
That's right.
They should be able to be free to go over to the charities themselves and not wait for them charities to come to them after they post something. I know. That's how it helped with me. I didn't know where to go to when I felt bad, and then I post something, and then I had all these charities bombarding me saying we have support here, and here. Exactly. And I was like, I've never been told this, don't know nothing. And I know from that day on, and I know from the later part of the year, there's been a lot of mental health problems in the farming. I know within the last 5 days there's someone within the interview that is quite high up that's actually lost someone on his farm. And I'm hoping that he will realise and think it's something to be addressed, that it needs to be addressed from the farmers' union and it needs to be a national thing. Yeah. And I would like to try and push that, to be honest.
Can I just say, if you, in our union, you see, I know I've pushed certain things. We have like a conference each year, and I go to 3 of them. I go to the Signalman's Conference or the National Operating Conference of Signalling Operating Grades. And I've highlighted about mental health in this. You know, I'm doing one this year. I'm pushing a resolution forward regarding it. And this is where it should be done, because this is the only way people get to know and get to understand about mental health, you know. And that's how I've done it. And that's where perhaps the FDU should be looking at that particular thing. When I did 1 year, I went to one health and safety conference that the RMT do. They have a conference every year. And we went to that, and that was all about mental health. The whole conference was dedicated to mental health. Something perhaps that should be looked at by other unions. Some unions do, some unions don't. I was approached by one union official who said, "You mean you do health and safety conferences?" He said, "Yes, we do." And that's something I said. He said, "Well, we should be looking at that." So he might come along to one of ours. See, these are things that should be taken up, because sometimes it's only when you do these things and you sort of all meet up, and some of you meet other reps or meet other officials, they think, we didn't realise this, you know. And that's the important factor of having this network, pushing these things forward. You know, that's from my own personal perspective, anyway.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. It should. I mean, I'm trying to push things in with the younger generation to try and highlight them so they don't get to the stage I was.
Yes.
And that's only by going into the colleges myself. And the tutors and my ag tutors was like, we never knew, and we're quite shocked.
Yes.
And I'm just hoping that themselves and other colleges, especially agriculture colleges and universities, would realise that it's something that they need to adjust and give the people the options and support that they know it's there, and not wait till it's too late. It's definitely, I don't know anything in farming that there's been any conferences in mental health at all. I've not heard anything, I've not seen it. I don't think there is. I'm just fingers crossed and praying in the new year and years to come that it's something that will happen because it is getting more and more. And I know that some farming magazines have published quite a lot of it, and I'm just hoping it isn't going to get highlighted. I don't know if it will, because there's so much politics and Brexit going on, it just gets shoved under the carpet.
Yes.
It's something that it would be nice if it went on the news. If it goes on the news, everyone's going to see it. And I know both of our industries, with Steve's in, it's always on the news, but for the bad reasons.
Yes.
There's always something going on.
Exactly.
The rail lines is either, I know recently, is either striking, that's fair enough, they have their opinion, and it's either lines going down, lines blocked, trains late, something going on the track, something's been killed on the track, farming, something goes wrong, we're paying too much pollution.
Exactly.
It's something that it's always on the news, it's bad things.
Exactly.
But it needs to be, they need to be highlighting the things that are good. People don't understand that most of our stuff that they eat is probably British, and stuff that they don't eat is British. I'm sure people don't use trains as much as they used to because we've got other vehicles, but that's such an important thing.
Exactly.
To commute. You go to London and you go, look how many trains is in King Cross and Paddington, and then you've got the London Underground, just a new bit. It's just, people don't just take it for granted.
I think that's the trouble with people, everything's taken for granted, but they don't realise the network that goes into actually running that particular service or doing that, because people have to be there to signal the trains, they have to be there to drive the trains, they have to be there to maintain the trains, they have to be there to maintain the track. They're working all the time. They're working 24, like the farmers, they are working 24/7, not say 24 hours, but they're doing different shifts to keep the whole thing structured. It's like the water industry, if you didn't have somebody doing that, you'd have issues here. You see, all these things are going on in the background. But as Dana said about the media, the unions always get a thing about, on strike and all this. Yes, that's part of what they do. They're fighting for certain rights. But there's also the other good side, where things are going on behind the scenes, where they're working very closely with the companies on these issues. This is things that are never highlighted. It's always the bad things.
Yeah, just because it's not being spoken about doesn't mean it's not happening.
No.
Exactly. That's quite correct, Ben.
Something I do want to raise, if someone listening to this podcast does think that they're going through a hard time or might be recognising a problem, Dan, can you just go through your experience of the help that you received and what is that step-by-step process?
Well, I mean,
of how you actually reach out.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a number of people who had asked me different questions on how I did it, and there isn't much to it on my side because I just decided to come out of it, and then I booked an appointment with my local GP, and I got help from there. And people go, well, did you go to any charities? And I go, no, the only person that kept me going was part of my family that understood what I was going through, my girlfriend that stood by me by the day one this is all gone on, and her family. They're the only people that kept me going and was able to help me. It weren't nothing to do with any charities, but after it all went viral and brought up on Farmers Weekly, I realised that there was charities, and even they offered help. And the only thing that keeps me going now is my girlfriend and my family and my friends that just keep an eye on me and just keep me going. It's the only thing that keeps me going at the moment. Yeah. And I've had a number of questions, people going, oh, what did you do? And I just went to the doctors. That's all I went. And it went from there, and people go, well, I don't really want to do that. And I go, well, then there's other options you go to, and I recommend them to the charities I think will help them. But everyone's different. Yeah, I mean, completely. I'm a very open guy. I'm extremely open now after what's going on. I have friends that are battling through the same thing I'm going, and I can tell they're not happy, but they won't talk to me about it. But they'll deal with it in their own way. Yeah. And their own way is for them to be quiet, or any other way. That's everyone's different, and it is hard when people ask you for help because everyone's not the same.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
Can I just add what Dan has said about my personal view?
Absolutely.
Because I think I went through a very bad time many years ago, and I went to the same place as Dan went through a very difficult time. The biggest support for me was the railway chaplains. They were a big support for me because they basically helped me, through a very difficult time. But again, family was another big input, and some work colleagues as well were a big input. But they didn't realise what was going on. They just think, "Are you all right? You just keep saying, "Yeah, I'm fine, I'm okay." but they had a feeling things were not.
Yeah.
And then I had to, and I did have an issue like that, and it was only the fact was that I had support from friends, family who knew, and from the railway chaplains and all that helped me through that time and helped me through that particular very bad time, that I did get assistance and I did get help. When I was growing up as a young kid, I had to go. I was sent to school, and this is something that was happening in the 70s. And I went to school, and my mother taught me very basic words like jam, cat, and all that sort of thing. And I then went to my first infant school, and I came home absolutely distraught that I couldn't read the language that they were sending us. What's going on here? And my mum went up to school and said, what's going on? He can't read. Until she found out they brought in this new practice called ITA, Advanced Teaching Alphabet. And it was like totally something new. It was trying to teach kids French before they could learn English. Yeah. It was done. It's gone now. But what it was actually written where, like a word was, okay, we spelled WAS. It was spelled WAZ with the back to front. It was used by different symbols and that. And all these kids were taught this, and then basically they then had to go to junior school and then start doing proper English. Well, how can you do that? So this impacted on their mental health. I knew one chap who actually picked it up just like that, and literally when he was writing in his essays he would revert back to it, but that was it. He couldn't stop it, and this affected him because it was affecting he was affecting his promotions and his career. So this is another thing that can happen, in regards to something that happened in your childhood could affect you in later life, and this affected me in later life because I had this happen to me. I sat once up the top of my grandparents' stairs thinking, which way? I was only 6 years old. Which way am I going to go here? I can't read, I can't write. And that was because the education system let me down. Do you see where I'm coming from here? So things that can happen within a family or something can happen in your childhood could also affect you in your adulthood, if you like to see, Just something I'd like to add there, that's all.
Absolutely, I think that's yeah.
Yeah, I can add something on that if you want this. When I was at school, for a number of years, there were some things I struggled with, some bits I didn't. Yeah. It took at least until I was in the old 3-tier system, until my upper school, that they kind of realised I had some sort of difficulties reading and doing maths, and they just pushed that to the side and goes, nah, he's all right. Until I got to my college, they go, right, you're dyslexic, you're dyscalculated, you need as much help as you possible. You did not get your support through your education. Now, that was the first biggest hurdle I come into the farming industry, to learn as much as I can, but then just being brought down saying, oh, you can't read, I can't spell, I can't write very well, I can't do maths. I was like, right, big alarm, am I going to the right industry? And that was the biggest hurdle, and I did get through it. It was a long process, and unfortunately, from what happened in my childhood at the start, I didn't have that support, and then it fell on me when I needed it the most, and then I was lucky to get the support, and I still now, when I was in the industry, I had to make different changes of something that I can understand. No one else could understand how it was. No, but I have to do it for myself, and I can go, well, I said this, and some reason go, well, that don't make no sense. I said, well, that makes sense to me. Exactly. So I'm all right. And it's something that was my first hurdle to get through that, and it took me. I was very close to saying, there's no point coming in this industry. There's too much writing and maths to it.
I think that's a really good point, that people recognising that people learn in different ways as well.
Yes.
And we don't all have the same mind. It doesn't work in the same way. You can still get to C, you might do A or B a bit differently, but
exactly.
We'll still get to the end result in some way.
If I could just add a bit to that, please, Ben. When I was going to school, I was exactly like Dan was. You were just pushed to one side, because you had this sort of learning difficulty. I was basic maths and English, I was struggling, but the schools just put you into what we used to call the bottom sets, and you were just left. Yep. You were just left to get on with it. They didn't understand. It was only when I left school and I went to my first job, and I'll give you my honest, my sort of personnel manager who took me on looked at my report and said, well, it looks, terrible, but my mum said, well, they didn't do anything for him, but lucky enough the railway at the time knew what I was and I had the interest, they took me on. Yep. But I learned more from the railway in the first 2 years than the education system did for me. When I went to block school, I learnt with a chap called Brian Riley, who was a very old-fashioned type block teacher, was what we used to call chalk and talk. And I was struggling with it. he said, "What's the matter, Steve?" And I had a difficult. He put me at the back of the class, but he brought me forward. So then I began to pick it up. So I wrote it in certain ways. But that man taught me more in literally 6 weeks than the school did over in 5 years. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to be honest about it, but they just left us, because we weren't clear in certain things. Because I think with schools, sometimes they pigeonhole you, because they think you should be doing this way, this way, and this way. And if you don't, you're just an outcast. You're just out. And I learnt more in that respect in the first 6 weeks of my working life, than I did any other time. That's my own personal view anyway.
I can agree with that fully. It's exactly how I was. My first voluntary job, and I would name him because he's happy to be named, was with Glyn Thomas in Bradfield St Clair. Voluntary, everyone goes, "Well, why are you working free?" I said, "I love it." And I learned so much about the cattle side. I put that into my college work, then went on to my next job, which was with their next door neighbour, with Mike Morley. I sat there for 4 years and I learned everything. I took everything that he learnt me is the most I've ever learnt in my life. I took that to go into my college, thrived at my college, and my tutor, John Atridge, at the time on the crops, I just shined with him. And I took everything from the college back to the farm, and I worked myself up for at least 8 years to go where I was.
Yeah.
And without them and my college tutors and my apprenticeship side of Helen Rees and Binny and Charlie Askew, I would not be where I am. Without them, they helped me so much because they understood me right away. I learnt more with them than I ever did in my whole school life when I was younger.
Exactly, because again, you were doing something you enjoyed.
Yep.
And that's what I found, because I enjoy railways. Now, I learned, I say with Brian wouldn't mind me mentioning, sadly he's not with us now, but a great instructor. But I also worked with a chap called Robert Wadey, who was my first supervisor at the CDO. And he saw me having problems. But with his guidance, with his knowledge being shown, I learnt more with that man in the first few years of my working life than anything else. He knew what I wanted to do. Because I was doing something I enjoyed doing, it went in. You know what I mean? It's just the way things are. But these people, if school just left you up, they just chucked you to one side. They weren't interested because you had done this, and this. You're an outcast. But once I got into what I needed and I wanted to do, these people showed you. It's only thanks to those people that you just began to progress and develop and carry on.
Yeah, and I think that's a really positive way of seeing. Mental health in the workplace really is actually the workplace, and in these particular cases on the railways and farming, it's a place where you can find confidence, you can find identity.
Yes, you can.
You can grow as a person and learn new skills. When you've done well, you can get that pat on the back and think, "Wow, look what I've achieved." And actually, that's as much about this conversation as anything else.
Yes.
Of course, it's recognising that there can be those struggles and those underlying challenges.
Yeah.
But if we put the focus on growth and learning and being comfortable in yourself and being positive in yourself, then, because otherwise I think there's a danger that we look at this subject as very, very, very negative, that actually it's only ever something that we talk about, well, this happens, therefore this is going to be a bad thing, therefore this is going to drive me in a certain way. But actually, let's look at the positive sides of the industries as well. Dan, Steve, thank you so much for speaking to me today. It's amazing how much crossover there is between the two.
Well, I found it's quite interesting.
I'm shocked how quickly or how I've never linked the farm and rail line together.
No.
And I've just realised it's not the same, but we have the exact same problems and we go through the exact same things.
We do indeed, and we do follow the same path in different ways, but we do follow the same sort of path. We're a 24-hour industry, and we do face different things every day, and one of them is the weather. So I think we do have that thing in common.
Well, I wish you both a very happy Christmas.
Thank you, Ben. And you.
Very, very happy New Year. Let's make 2020 a good one.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Dan Goodwin and Steve Loeber. I want to thank them both very much for that conversation. Thank you for listening, and I hope you can join me next time on Meet the Farmers.